Senator Lynn Boylan. Senator Boylan.
I'm using today's commencement matter to raise an important issue, which is wildlife crime. And the Biodiversity Citizens' Assembly was crystal clear in that the state has failed to adequately enforce existing laws and policies to protect biodiversity. And wildlife crime, whether it's disturbing bats, illegal hare hunting, badger baiting, or the destruction of habitats that provide clean water, clean air and healthy soils, all contribute to the loss of biodiversity. And weak enforcement that we have in this country is clearly sending the message that wildlife crime is tolerated and is not taken seriously. And unfortunately, despite some high-profile cases of illegal wildfires and poisonings, there has been a failure to crack down on wildlife crime in any meaningful way. Some statistics just to highlight that failure. If you look at the records from when the Wildlife Act came in between 1977 and 1987, there were 752 cases, which was an average of 75 prosecutions per year. However, there were only 118 wildlife crime cases closed successfully since 2020. So that's an average of 39.3 per year, which is a drop of 48% per year in prosecutions, and it's not because the crimes aren't happening, unfortunately. And no doubt, Minister, and I know it's not your portfolio, but you're more than likely going to cite the year-on-year increase of 39% from 2022 to 2023, which is up to 43 prosecutions. But of course, that is a step in the right direction, but we're starting from a very low level. So it is, I suppose, that example of a shifting baseline syndrome. And I also know that in the 1980s there was a target set for the number of prosecutions per year. That was a target of 200. It wasn't reached, given that we have an average of 75. But the recently launched National Biodiversity Action Plan doesn't contain a specific target for prosecutions, and instead just has the vague ambition that it seeks to increase compliance with wildlife legislation in cooperation with agencies through enhanced detection, enforcement and awareness raising. So I suppose the first question really is for the Minister is, do you agree, or do any of the agencies agree, that there should be a specific target, that we should be setting a target, and if so, what should that target be? The Citizens' Assembly has called on the state to take prompt, decisive and urgent action to address biodiversity loss and restoration, and we do need a zero-tolerance approach to wildlife crime. And so there was some optimism, I have to say, at the start of this government, with the focus on wildlife crime making it into the programme for government. That, however, has dissipated when we've seen the U-turn on the dedicated wildlife crime unit. And we know that one of the main barriers to increasing prosecutions is that the responsibilities of the National Parks and Wildlife Service are so wide-ranging that they require skill sets that are extremely specialised, and bringing prosecutions is clearly a complicated task. So the only real way out of this gap, as the experts have said, is to establish that promised wildlife crime unit, a go-to hub to support regional staff with the prosecution on detections, with the procedures on detection, investigation, putting a prosecution file together, and then bringing that to the office of the CSSO. So I suppose, Minister, one of the questions, as I said, is do you agree that a target would be helpful to set the agenda and to drive the ambition in having a zero-tolerance approach to wildlife crime, but also would the government reconsider its position on establishing that wildlife crime unit, which all of the experts have said is essential for tackling wildlife crime?
Thank you very much, Senator Boylan. Minister.
Thanks, Senator, for raising this really important issue, and I'm taking this on behalf of Minister Malcolm Noonan. It wouldn't be an area I'd have huge expertise in, but I do come from a rural area and well equipped to know what wildlife crime is, and it is a widespread issue. And it poses a serious threat to our biodiversity and our sustainable development of countless communities. While there is no universally agreed definition of what constitutes wildlife crime, it can be described as any action that contravenes current legislation governing the protection of wildlife, but it probably goes beyond that as well. Ireland's fourth National Biodiversity Action Plan 23 to 30, the first National Biodiversity Action Plan to be published on a statutory basis, was launched by Minister of State Malcolm Noonan on the 25th of January and takes an all-of-government, all-of-society approach to protecting nature. The plan includes targets to ensure that the legislative framework for biodiversity conservation is robust, clear and enforceable. And you've asked me a question which I'm going to answer, because I always feel targets are always important and they help to really drive on a service. So from a personal perspective, I do like to see targets, and I do like to see targets being met. In relation to your question about whether the government will reconsider, I will bring that back to the Minister, and I'll ask him to engage with you in relation to those two specifics. The National Park and Wildlife Service is strengthening action on wildlife crime within the NPWS itself and through strategic collaboration with other enforcement and regulatory authorities such as the Garda Síochána. The work of the NPWS staff across the organisation has seen an increase, as you said, in prosecution cases taken of 39% in 2023 compared to 2022 figures. Wildlife prosecutions taken by the NPWS include illegal hunting of protected wildlife, such as disturbance to badger sets, damage to protected habitats and unlawful destruction of vegetation in hedgerows, to name but a few. The NPWS capability to take more enforcement action, detect and prevent wildlife crime has been greatly enhanced through the recruitment of additional NPWS staff to support their work. This means that there will be more boots on the ground patrolling, investigating, enforcing and educating, and I think education is really important here. The NPWS are also recruiting ecologists to add scientific expertise and ballast across NPWS to their wildlife crime efforts. Strengthening relationships with other enforcement and regulatory authorities such as customs is also pivotal. NPWS are building on a joint protocol with Garda Síochána, who have powers and functions to enforce wildlife legislation similar to the NPWS authorised officers. And the NPWS are deepening collaboration, have clearer lines of communication and are providing mutual support on wildlife crime issues. Additionally, the NPWS are reviewing the Wildlife Act to improve its enforceability, and a public consultation on this will be announced very shortly. And I think the key word there is enforceability. It's really important that the extra boots on the ground will be able to enforce the Wildlife Act.
Thank you very much, Minister. Senator Boylan.
And thank you, Minister, for your response, and thank you for agreeing that a target is always useful to keep the focus. And I do welcome the response that was given, the official response, but particularly as well around the public consultation, because apart from being passionate about wildlife crime myself, I am raising this question because I'm supporting an Oxfam-led initiative which is to help grassroots groups that are made up of communities and young people, ordinary citizens across Ireland, to hold elected officials like ourselves to account. And in this instance, it was the Wildlife Rehabilitation Hospital has been very helpful in providing some of the background information. And I do know that if you're going to take back to Minister Noonan around the wildlife crime unit, they'd like some other questions answered as well around the discrepancy at a regional basis on prosecutions, what additional resources will be put in place, how is the awareness raising going to take place, and I suppose just the boots on the ground are really, really important, but also that professional staff in terms of the skills for bringing prosecutions. So the people who are on the ground are doing fantastic work, but we also need that skill set of delivering on prosecutions. So I thank you, Minister, for your response. And as I said, I look forward maybe to Minister Noonan responding in writing to some of those questions.
Thanks very much.
I will certainly bring back those questions to Minister Noonan. His office is actually only directly opposite mine on the corridor, and I have no doubt he will also engage with this Oxfam-led initiatives. Adherence to environmental rules is a safeguard for preserving biodiversity, health and sustainable progress over time, and it is difficult to process the drivers for the loss of biodiversity through deliberate disregard of the law by some. There is no doubt that action is needed to thwart this, and the NPWS, in collaboration with other authorities and public support, remain committed to take action to protect our nature and our biodiversity. It's clear that the majority of people want to protect nature, and we see tidy towns groups the length and breadth of the country working so hard in their own communities. And it's our job, all of us, we have an onus on us to enable them and deter and prosecute those that don't support and don't protect nature. Educating and increasing awareness along with citizen reporting are essential elements in safeguarding nature and to help prevent wildlife crime. If a suspected wildlife crime or a possible breach of wildlife legislation has taken place, reports can be made to the local NPWS office of An Garda Síochána, which you know, and the contact details are available for anyone who wants to do this. We are at a turning point in Ireland in terms of the way we view and think about the natural world and our place within it. And I think there's an awful lot of good people who want to see the natural world retained and looked after. So I'll certainly bring your concerns back to the Minister. Thank you, Senator.
Senator Boylan, thank you very much. It's an extremely important issue, and we wish Oxfam the very best with their incredibly important work.